Hello, I'm Sandy Jordan, and I have Beatrice Jean Batiste joining me today from Journeys because some questions have surfaced recently pertaining to Journeys and the best way for us to use it in Lexington 1. Last Tuesday, Beatrice and a senior editor and another consultant joined us in Lexington, and we had all the assistant principals come. During that time, I thought some really smart thinking came out of that meeting. So what we're going to try to share with you today is some of that smart thinking, with Beatrice giving us her expert information. So we're going to start, Beatrice, first with just thinking about what Journeys has and thinking of us, Beatrice, as a district who's used balanced literacy in the past and felt we had a lot of success with that. Now having Journeys, we have a lot more components to try to fit in. It's more of a structured model too. So we just want your expert thinking about how to fit it in. One thing I'd like to start off with, though, is I understand that I know that we're using a comprehensive language and literacy guide for my whole group lessons. But when I go into here to get my whole group lessons, I realize that what I have satisfied, Beatrice, would you open up the focus just a focus wall for me? And I know what I've satisfied by doing this is I've satisfied my target skill. That is in here. I know that I've satisfied my fluency component because that would be in my CLLG guide too. I know I have my mini principle I'm going to make sure to address as well. But when it comes to the target strategy, I've got the skill. I know my skills in here. But what would your recommendation be for making sure that I've covered the target strategy?
Well, I would go back into the core teacher's guide.
Okay.
And I would do some of those target strategy lessons. Because the great thing is that the Comprehensive Language Literacy Guide mini lesson principle is not going to take you as long. So you'll have some time during specific days, like maybe day 4, also maybe part of day 3, because you're doing your main story day 2 and day 3.
Right.
And then day 4 is your paired selection. And so you could do some of your comprehension targeted strategy instruction during those specific days. Just as long as you do go into this teacher's edition to teach some of those core, common core standards like your decoding, your phonics, your phonemic awareness, your target strategy, your vocabulary.
Okay, so now, I know that we're looking at the focus wall that's in the big teacher's edition, and I know the teachers are making good use of the focus wall electronically. So now, back to that question about fitting in those other components. Give me some of your thinking about how could I get in, rather smoothly integrating into what I do in balanced literacy with my phonics decoding, my vocabulary strategy. Let's talk about those first.
Okay, well, depending on your grade level, if
Sure.
you're K1 and 2 and 3 as well, you'll notice that you have specific phonemic awareness, phonics, and vocabulary activities that you're going to do every day.
Sure.
Because it's divided day 1 all the way through day 5. So for those primary teachers, especially in K1 and 2, you're going to be using the decodable books. And
Sure.
so when you're teaching those specific lessons, if you are using your assessment to guide your instruction where you know your kids, then you would start off, because they all need to have those foundational skills taught based on the Common Core standards, and you want to make sure you're teaching them in this core teacher's edition.
Sure.
But you can abbreviate it so that it fits in the time you have to teach. And so for those students that you've targeted that based on your professional judgment may not need the entire lesson, then you would abbreviate it for the whole group and then target those students that do need the entire lesson. And those students, you can continue that lesson within your small group.
Okay. Is it possible, do you think, Beatrice, that I could fit some of that thinking into like my actual main selection and my paired selection? Would that be a possibility to get
Yes.
some of the phonics decoding?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering.
So what you would do, for example, maybe the same day one when you're doing that teacher read aloud,
Sure.
and you're going to introduce the key vocabulary words on day one, you would also do some of the phonics skill work.
I gotcha.
If you're first or second grade, if you're kindergarten, you would do some of that phonemic awareness that you see embedded in each day. Because each day would have specific lessons, and then you would just look at the lesson, and sometimes it might say, you know, you're going to do this, repeat this 4 or 5 times.
Sure.
And so instead of repeating it 5 times or doing that instructional routine, you would do it maybe 2 times.
Right.
Because maybe all your kids don't need it.
So then those that do,
But that
you're
would be
taking
during whole group.
Sure, you're taking it small group, those that do need it.
Mhm.
Okay, the grammar. Let's talk about the grammar. Tell me, I'm pretty sure that's going to be connected to the writing, correct?
Yes, the grammar is always connected to the writing, and it's always going to have some connection to the main story as well.
Okay. Well, I think that might help some of our people with that, trying to think more of a balanced literacy approach and not so chopped up, to try to fit as much as you can possibly into their main selection or their paired selection to get some of the other skills they need to, you know, in a probably smoother fashion is what I'm thinking.
That's right.
Okay, great. Let's move on to something else now. Let's move on to, we've had some questions about rigor and about they feel like possibly they need to have more rigor within the program. What suggestions do you have for that?
Well, since they do have the student book, the
Sure.
anthology that has the main selection,
Right.
what they'll notice within the main selection, because remember they're using the Comprehensive Language and Literacy Guide to teach that skill and that mini lesson principle, but there are also what we call stop and think questions embedded in the story that support the new Common Core, where teachers need to teach students how to go back into the text to find their answers, text-dependent questions.
Yes.
And so there will be those text-dependent questions embedded in the student book and, of course, in the teacher's guide. So this is where now the teacher would go to those questions, and each main story has 3 questions.
Okay.
You'll have one that's going to be targeted, a question that's targeted based on the skill that you're focusing on for the week, another one based on the strategy, and then the last one will be the author's craft. So what I would suggest to build that rigor, the teacher would then go to that stop and think. So for instance, this is the story, a fine
school,
a fine school. And so right in the student book, so the teacher wouldn't have to make a copy of this, here's where they would stop and have some discussion. So this one says, you know, after the students or the teacher has read up to the specific page, find places on pages 17 through 21 where the author repeats words and sentences to make the story more fun to read. And then it gives the teacher an opportunity to ask, why do you think the author used so much repetition? Because there's a reason why the author uses that. So that's one question that's based on that higher level of Bloom's taxonomy.
Getting in the author's craft. I see that. Okay.
That's right. And so another one talks about the story structure, because that is one of our target skills. What is the main problem in the story? Which story character is responsible for this problem? So again, you can see that we're asking the kids to analyze the character's motives.
Yeah.
And so again, that's one of the questions that are, you know, based on, critical thinking. And the teacher has the support in the teacher's guide saying, why don't the children and teachers complain about Mr. Keen's decisions, explain. So again, having the students really show you that they have comprehended what they've read, and then having them critically think about the story and what's going on in the story. So I would go into those stop and think questions, because it's already in the student book. The teacher doesn't have to make a copy. And also at the end of every story, they have a your turn that's in the student book. And again, this is based on the new Common Core standards of having the kids communicate and
Sure.
collaborate based on what they've just read. So here's where it talks about turn and talk, work with a partner to retell the main events of the story, ask questions to help each other remember what happened. That's based on the story structure again. Here's another one, write a list. Thanks to Tilly, Mr. Keene understands that some important things can be learned only outside of school. What are some of these important things? List them and tell why they are important. So the students have to go back into the text. That's what I mean by text dependent questions.
Gotcha.
And again, they have to understand what the purpose of what was going on in the story to actually do this activity.
Got it.
And so again, this is something that they can start off in whole group, and then this would then be a purposeful, meaningful, independent center activity while they're in small group,
Well, just
or
to,
even meaningful homework.
to recap, what I think I'm hearing is that when you need to build more rigor, then you can use your Big TE as a resource to build that rigor within the classroom. One thing I want to share with you, Beatrice, also is within our district, we also have a lot of resources at our school. At our schools, we have like comprehension toolkits, which also can help with that critical thinking and higher level thinking. So that's another resource for them to use to build that rigor. So I appreciate all that information. That really is going to help. Let's move on to one other big topic, which is word study. We had a great conversation last Tuesday, and a lot of our teachers in our district, not everybody, but a fair amount, do know how to do what Shane Templeton has done in his authoring of the word study guide that he's produced for your company. And a lot of our teachers do know how to do exactly what words their way. And we feel very comfortable telling teachers that if they know how to use words their way, to go ahead and do that, because that's what Shane Templeton would want them to do. But for my teachers who do not have that knowledge or choose not to do that, what would be your recommendation for word study?
Well, what you'll notice about the word study guide is that it is going to, other than grade K in kindergarten, you'll see that the spelling focus as well as the vocabulary is going to match what you have found in the focus wall.
Sure.
So if the teacher chooses to use the word study guide, then what she would do is use the spelling lists that are embedded in the word study guide,
Sure.
as well as the vocabulary activities. Now, that's to say, in Shane Templeton's word study guide that he's developed for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, there are 3 different spelling lists because, he uses the spelling lists that are developmentally appropriate for our advanced students as well as our struggling students. So you'll notice that the on-level spelling words will match the specific skill that you're teaching within your phonics. However, the advanced level is not going to match because those students are beyond that. And so you'll see that the words are not going to be an exact match
Sure.
to that skill. And then, of course, for the struggling students, they need some review or a double dose of phonics. So you'll see that the words are going to support some of that vowel, consonant, rule, pattern, things like that. So it's not going to necessarily match the focus wall for that week. And so that's just some background for the teacher. But the on level will match. And then again, the vocabulary for the week will match as well. And what the teacher can choose to do is those vocabulary strategies for each day and maybe interchange one of the days because the vocabulary strategy that'll be on the focus wall will not be embedded in the word study
Okay, it's
guide.
not in there. Okay.
Yes, and that's just something that they'll find day 4 in
Day
the
4.
big core TE
Right.
that they can substitute one of the days of the activities that are in the word study guide. But again, they don't have to necessarily do the vocabulary activities verbatim that's in that core TE because the vocabulary words and the activities are still going to match that same vocabulary skill or the vocabulary words that we're targeting for each week. Now, in kindergarten, you'll see that it's not an exact match because what we do is we kind of trail behind the skills that are
Sure.
being taught in the core TE And the word study guide is going to follow up on that, because in kindergarten, the first few weeks they're reviewing the alphabet,
Right.
and they're not jumping into their phonics skills. And so that's why the word study guide in kindergarten is not an exact match when it comes to spelling, but the vocabulary is a little different.
Let me just ask you a question. With the target vocabulary, I know that the teachers have, and the students as well, have seen the target vocabulary within the readings that they had for the week. They're going to see their main selection, the paired selection, the read aloud, their interactive read aloud. So, if you're trimming time, would that be a place that they could trim some time? Would be with the target vocabulary, since the students have been exposed at least 4 days to it?
Yes, if you wanted to abbreviate some of those vocabulary lessons, definitely. And especially the word study guide, word sort activities.
Sure.
Because you can do some of them and not the complete activity.
Right.
And then maybe have them work in groups and with partners and center activities to finish some of those word sort activities.
More in small group. And one thing I just need to also explain to you, just so you understand our district, from our research and our learning, we have found out that doing like the old kind of spelling test lists just doesn't produce the kind of results we want for our children. We don't see the transfer of that information to writing and knowledge. So we feel like if we're going to assess word study, we're going to do it more in the patterns of the spelling instead of just like a straight spelling list type of assessment.
And that's why you'd want to take the spelling word list from the word study guide, because the way Shane has put it together, it's based on patterns and how our language works.
Exactly.
And then the activities that support the spelling will be based on patterns and how our language works.
Sure.
And so, again, if the teacher wants to have so-called spelling lists, the word study guide is where they would want to get that core instruction, and not from this core TE, because this really fits your model and your philosophy here in Lexington 1.
Exactly. Well, I just do want to thank you for all the support you've given Libby and me and our whole district.
You're quite welcome.
And I want to also mention, we have had some areas of concern, and it has to do with technology. I feel like you've listened to us in every aspect of that. Whenever I go, oh, by the way, Beatrice, here's another little glitch that we're seeing. And I know the company is trying to work on that. I feel like you're always giving me another way that maybe I can work through the company to get some of those things figured out. And I do appreciate that, and I want our district to know that we're constantly trying to work with the company to work through any of the glitches that we do see. And I so appreciate you coming today, that you went out of your way, you're on your way to Edgefield to do more training this afternoon, to work with us and to get this next level of filming out there to the teachers and get these good ideas, tips, in our next little level of where we are with our thinking. And I so appreciate you coming, Beatrice.
You're very welcome.
And
No
I hope
problem.
you have a great
Anytime.
rest of the day.
Thank you. Do the same.